down the bottom there. And I'd go. It was our devotees who were distributing books around Chatsworth and other areas. And I'd go there once a week and stay overnight and have a program with them. It was nice. And we did tent campaigns. I don't know if there's still an open piece of ground there on that road, on this side. But we used to have the tent there, the big marquee. Yeah. Right. So ISKCON Unit 11, Kijai. You live here? Okay. Oh, you're in the right place. So devotees and friends, Hare Krishna. Devotees and friends and family. How nice to be with you. It's just really nice. On this very pleasant evening. It's not hot, it's not cold, it's just nice. And I thought we could read a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. It's from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service. And it's verse 11. Yeah, let me just have a look here. Right, okay. Well, first of all, repeat after me, please. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So here we go. You know, if any of you are into, if you like learning verses, this is a good verse to learn. Yeah. Actually, I've got a whole list. I've got such a list of a few hundred verses. Yeah, from here and there. Quite a number from Bhagavad Gita and then Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and this one is there. It's a really nice verse. First canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, verse 7. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahoitukam, which means by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Yeah. One immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Okay, so now I'm just going to read part of the purport. I'm going to read the second paragraph. The principles of knowledge and detachment are two important factors on the path of transcendental realization. The whole spiritual process leads to perfect knowledge of everything, material and spiritual. And the results of such perfect knowledge are that one becomes detached from material affection and becomes attached to spiritual activities. Becoming detached from material things does not mean becoming inert altogether, as men with a poor fund of knowledge think. Naishkarma means not undertaking activities that will produce good or bad effects. Negation does not mean negation of the positive. Negation of the non-essentials does not mean negation of the essential. Similarly, detachment from material forms does not mean nullifying the positive form. The bhakti cult is meant for realization of the positive form. When the positive form is realized, the negative forms are automatically eliminated. Therefore, with the development of the bhakti cult, with the application of positive service to the positive form, one naturally becomes detached from inferior things, and he becomes attached to superior things. Similarly, the bhakti cult, being the supermost occupation of the living being, leads him out of material sense enjoyment. That is the sign of a pure devotee. He is not a fool, nor is he engaged in the inferior energies, nor does he have material values. This is not possible by dry reasoning. It actually happens by the grace of the Almighty. In conclusion, one who is a pure devotee has all other good qualities, namely knowledge, detachment, etc. But one who has only knowledge or detachment is not necessarily well acquainted with the principles of the bhakti cult. Bhakti is the supermost occupation of the human being. I'll just read the verse again. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojata Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahoitukam. Translation: by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So devotees, I read through just the last sort of half or so of the purport, and as I was reading, I realized it was a little complicated, at least for people who are not experienced with all these concepts which we are dealing with every day. So, but anyway, the basic point is straightforward, actually, that if we render service unto the Lord, unto the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, then we immediately and effortlessly we acquire knowledge and detachment from the world. Yes, knowledge, of course. Knowledge is very important. The pen is mightier than the sword, as they say. Right. And detachment also. Sometimes people become attached to just some useless things. Oh my gosh. Like smoking cigarettes. Ah. It's true, you know. Don't mind me saying it. I'm sure we all know at least one person who's addicted to cigarettes. But it's useless. It is, really. It costs how much money? Sure. If you smoke 20 cigarettes a day for 50 years, you might have been able to buy a house, or at least you could buy a good motor car or something like that, for sure. So anyway, useless things. I had an interesting experience one time. This is really quite an extraordinary thing. Was in the 80s, the mid-80s. And at that time I was based in England, but we would travel all around and distribute Prabhupada's books on the streets, all over England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland also. So I was particularly doing that in Ireland. And one day we were in, I can't remember the name of the place, but some small town, country town in, I think, Northern Ireland. And who should come along but two drunkards. Oh, boy. And they were so drunk. Each had a bottle in his hand, and they're just singing something crazy and, going from one side of the footpath to the other. I mean, it was just a classic type of situation. Oh. And we were there dressed like this, distributing our books. I think we were dressed like this. And these guys went by and they just, waved to us and walked on about 15 meters. Then they stopped. And one of them came back to us, specifically to us, and said, "Whatever you do in life, don't become like us." Seriously, no kidding at all. It's one of those experiences that I'll never forget. Yeah, that don't drink. Then off he went. His friend was waiting, 10 meters away or 15 meters. And again, whoa, off they went. Really, it happened. And yeah, I mean, you couldn't help but think, what a useless. It would be so good for them to be detached from it. But they're attached to it. And who knows what they've done to their lives. Just talking about that sort of thing. Before I became a Hare Krishna devotee, back it was in 1969, I just finished high school. I got the equivalent, this was in New Zealand, I got the equivalent of matric. They call it university entrance. So I passed that, but then I decided I wanted to become a writer. That's what I wanted to do. So my father, who was very well connected, he got me a job on one of the big daily newspapers. Okay, so I was working there as a reporter. And one time, devotees and friends and family, listen to this, the drivers of the beer tankers, the beer tankers went on strike. And they were on strike for more than a month. And all the beer in the country was finished completely. For a couple, 2 or 3, it took about a week or something. And it all ran out. Then all the whiskey and you name it, all those other drinks, all the wine, it was finished in the country. And our police reporter, that was his specialty. He was always every day he'd go visit the police and find out what's the latest case happening, the crime reporter. So one day he came in and said, you know what? There I was with the chief of police for the city. And he told him the crime rate has dropped by 90%. How's that? I was not a Hare Krishna devotee. This is 1968. I only really became some sort of Hare Krishna devotee back in 1973. Oh, well, you know about that, don't you? 50 years ago. But so this was like 5 years, 69. So 4 years or something. I hardly knew anything about Krishna consciousness. But this is what happened. He walked in. He was like this tough journalist. Wow. And he announced this. Yeah, the crime rate has dropped by 90%. So to be detached from these useless and even dangerous things is actually an excellent idea. But the thing is that if we render service to Krishna, if we chant his names, we associate with the devotees, attend the programs like in our temple over there, and study the literatures, all these things, then just by rendering service, then the verse says that one acquires causeless knowledge and detachment. There's not exactly a cause to it. It just comes from within you. Yeah, some understanding just comes sort of out of the blue. But you know this saying, out of the blue, right? You're familiar with that. It means out of nowhere. That's the idea. But out of the blue, the thing is, Krishna's blue. So it's coming from Krishna, actually. It's just they can't see it. So they think that out of the blue means just out of nowhere. But actually it means out of Krishna. So yeah, if you render service to Krishna, he supplies you with knowledge and detachment. And I want to tell you one other little story. It's not about me. It's about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was the spiritual master of Prabhupada, the founder of our movement. So he was a great scholar, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, just a really great scholar in many things. And one day, one professor from the Varanasi Hindu University, Varanasi, I think that's UP, isn't it? Varanasi is UP. So yeah, this one professor from the Hindu University means, it's basically all about Hinduism, but it's a university. So this one professor came he wanted to ask some questions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was so famous as a scholar of religious and spiritual matters. So the fellow came in, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very busy, very, very busy. And he told the professor that, I can't see you right now, but just hang on. Maybe in half an hour I'll be free, and then I'll be happy to meet you. So the fellow had come all the way from Varanasi down into West Bengal. It's a long way. It's several hundred kilometers. So he thought, okay, I'll wait. So he's waiting, actually he hadn't really started waiting, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, while you're waiting, you see these young boys over here. There were some young temple resident boys, like Jai Krishna Das. What's your age now? Wow. I was 20. 51 years ago. I remember what it was like. Anyway, okay. So these are young fellows. Even some of them could have been late teens, possibly, or maybe early 20s. There was a group of them, 4 or 5 or 6. And what they were doing, they were cleaning the different items that they use for offering the arti to the deities on the main altar there. It was in one of the big temples there. So, like made of brass, so they're using like brasso, or actually probably lemon juice, because lemon juice is better for brass, or silver. So all these things, little bowls they put the flowers in, and the lamp with the ghee wicks, that device, and etc. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, while you're waiting, why don't you just go and help those boys? Oh, no, he said, why don't you go and ask them your questions, first of all? And he's a big Hindu professor, probably 50 years old, and, he's been in it for decades. And he thought, gosh, that's really strange. Here I am, big professor, and here these little boys. And he wants me to ask them the questions. But anyway, he was sort of, because he's Hindu, he was kind of soft-hearted. So he said, okay. So he went over to the boys and said, I want to ask your spiritual master some questions, but he's busy. Said I should ask you. And so they said, yeah, okay. But we're busy too. We're cleaning the arti paraphernalia. So I tell you what, why don't you help us? And we'll finish quicker, and then we can answer your questions. So the fellow thought, gosh, first they make me wait, then they ask me to go and ask some little boys. Now they're trying to get some free labor out of me. But anyway, so he agreed, okay. So now he's cleaning with the boys. The arti paraphernalia is busy cleaning this and that and everything. And as he's doing this, you know what happened? All the answers to all his questions started appearing in his mind out of the blue, apparently out of nowhere. And by the time they finished cleaning all that brassware, all his questions the answers had just appeared in his mind. So then Srila so they finished, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta came to him and said, "Okay, I'm free now. Come with me. Let's sit down and we'll discuss. I'll answer your questions." And the man said, "No, it's okay. All my questions have been answered. Yeah. Now I don't really have any questions. The answers just came while I was helping the boys cleaning the paraphernalia." In other words, what he was doing service. That's what he was doing. Service to the Lord. Because those different items were used in the worship of the Lord. So yes, and then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta quoted this verse to him. Yeah. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Yeah, so it's a very interesting and important point. It's really an important point, actually. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 15, very famous verse, Savasya chaham riddhi sanavishto mata smriti jnanam aponam cha. Lord Krishna says, I'm situated in everyone's heart, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Yeah. And then he says, by all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the knower of the Vedas. Yeah. Yeah, and words to that effect. But in this regard, he says that I'm situated in everyone's heart, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. You may have had the experience sometimes of meeting a person who you haven't seen for a while, and you forget their name. Did it ever happen to you? I mean, that's one thing. I mean, there's a few things. Yeah, and it's like, oh, hello. Yeah, hello. And you can't say, hello, such and such, because you forgot. Means Krishna took your memory away. Or, a much more obvious, a very obvious example. When you're at school, like particularly when you get to the higher levels or you get to university, how many times did you, when you were studying oncology, get 100% in your exams? Not really, right? I know, it's rare. Because even though you heard it all, you studied it all, and maybe you went back over it again also. But anyway, like this, knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So Prabhupada said, for the devotee, for the non-devotees, just, your ordinary people in the street, for them, so knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Krishna gives them knowledge, how to try to make the most of it in day-to-day life, how to get ahead, get money, and get a good car, and a Lani house, and you know what I mean, right? He gives knowledge, and he gives them remembrance of how to do things, worldly things. Yeah. And he gives forgetfulness of himself. Of God. He gives them forgetfulness. Because that's what they want. They don't want to remember God. They want to be absorbed in what's going on in material life and make the most of it. Yes. So, but for the devotee, Krishna gives knowledge of himself. Then he gives the devotee remembrance of himself. And he gives the devotee forgetfulness of just materialistic life and all those things. So that's interesting. And one devotee actually told me a few years ago that before he was a devotee, he was from Durban, Indian background, and before becoming a devotee, he had been like really into meat eating, like not just omnivorous that eats anything, but carnivorous, like he only eats meat more or less. But then he became a devotee, and of course, we don't do that sort of thing. So he just forgot about it because prasadam is so nice. Right? Your mother's cooking's nice, right? Right? Your mother's cooking is nice? Well, that's what I was going to say. Okay. She's going to cook lunch for me. Oh, I'm excited. So with good cooking like that, you forget about these things. So anyway, what happened was that he'd been a devotee already now a couple of years, and there was a friend, they used to go to the bars and the restaurants and all these places and indulge in those things. But now he stopped for a couple of years, but he hadn't seen that fellow since he became a devotee. Then he bumped into the fellow, and the fellow said, "Oh, yeah, I heard you became a Hare Krishna devotee. Wow, that's interesting. But tell me, how did you give up eating meat? Because you were so much into it." And the devotee answered that, "Actually, I didn't give up meat. Meat gave up me." Just one day, I realized, hey, I've just forgotten about it completely. Yeah. So anyway, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. When it says causeless, what it doesn't mean like just absolutely causeless. It means that there's no material cause. No material cause, like I read it in the book, so I know about it. Or I just gave up something, so I'm detached from it by my own effort. But it's coming from Krishna within the heart. These things are coming from the Lord. But because we don't see that, these people who don't have that sort of vision, they're not really tuned in to the presence of the Lord sufficiently. They think it's just accident. It just happened. But we know that it comes out of the blue, out of Krishna. And let me just tell you one other, in terms of tuning in. Krishna's working like that. He's working with our minds and giving us knowledge, remembrance, understanding, taking it away sometimes. Actually, I wanted to read one other verse from Bhagavad Gita. Let me just quickly read it, it goes along with what we were just reading. It's Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 10. Tesham sadhata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvikam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te, which means to those who are constantly devoted, same idea, constantly devoted to serving me, because it's Krishna himself speaking, to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So that's particularly about knowledge and understanding, not so much detachment. But yeah, it's the same idea. In principle, it's the same idea. These things are coming from Krishna, but your ordinary person in the street doesn't know that, so they think it's just coming out of nowhere. Yeah, just by chance or luck or whatever, something like that. So yeah, so we have to tune in. The more we tune in to the presence of the Lord, how he's doing things, because he's doing so many things in our lives. He is an active participant in our lives. But our problem, or the people's problem generally, is they're not tuned in. And so they can't see how his hands are working in their lives. So yeah, you got to tune in. Just like, I think it's different now, but when I was young, I remember when my family, we got our first television set. And I don't know, I was probably about 10 or something, black and white TV. And my father, I remember we had a 2-story house. My father had to climb up by the chimney and attach the aerial, and position it in the right position. Otherwise you get all this like snow or whatever. And my mother was there looking at the TV as my father's, adjusting it. Is it okay now? No. Keep going. Is it okay now? No, no. And then, is it okay now? Yes, you got it. Then you fasten it there. And you don't move it. Yeah, so yeah. So you got to tune it in. And with the radio, when I was young, there was no television. It didn't exist. So we listened to the radio at night. Yeah. We listened to the radio. And it's the same thing. You got to tune it in. Otherwise you get this sort of hissing sound. And then you get the station, and then it's okay. Then you can hear it. So it's called tuning in. And so there's a famous story, which not so many people know, about tuning in. That in America, in the, I think, later 1920s, there was what they call the Great Depression. You heard of that, the Great Depression? All the banks, businesses went bankrupt because they loaned, anyway, they loaned too much money and they ran out of money. And 90% of the adult population was unemployed, 90%. And they were just living barely, and many people died from like suicide and so on. It was just incredibly heavy. So it was very hard to get a job. And if there was a job on offer, then 500 people would turn up to apply for one job. So the Western Union the communications company needed a Morse code operator. You know what Morse code is, right? You know what it is. Do you know what Morse code you do? You know what Morse code is? You don't. Do you know what Morse code is? Anyway, it's what they used to use for telegrams. And you hit the keys, hit the one key, and you hit it so many times, it's this letter. You hit it another number of times, it's a different letter. In this way, they send messages by dots, very quick. No, that dots are slow. Dot, dot, dot. You know what that is in Morse code? 3 slow dots. You don't know. S, it's the letter S. Dot, dot, dot. And then 3 quick ones. Dot, 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 dot is O. So dot, 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 dot is SOS. It's the alarm call. Yeah. I didn't learn Morse code, but I knew a bit. So they needed a Morse code operator, someone to operate the device, and just all day just send messages by dot 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 and etc. But there's not a lot of people who know Morse code. But 500 people came to get the job. And it was in this big building, sort of like a warehouse, that they were being interviewed. And people were doing some repairs to the building. So there was sawing, there was hammering, and all that sort of thing going on. And there's the queue, 500, and one by one going into the manager's office. And he rejected them all. He was rejecting them all because they didn't know Morse code. Who knows Morse code? Really not many people. Suddenly, from the back of the queue, one young man came running up and ran into the manager's office. And all the people in the queue, they thought, what's this? Why is he doing that? He can't do that. And then a few minutes later, the manager came out with the young man and said to the others, you can all go home now. I've given him the job. So they thought, we're going to get this guy. He cheated. But the manager said, the thing is, I'm giving him the job because he knows Morse code. And he said, you hear the hammering. Bang, 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 bang. That's all the Morse code I know. He said, they're hammering in Morse code. And what they're saying is, if you understand this, just come to my office immediately. I'll give you the job straight away. Do you get that? So the thing is, you got to be tuned in. If you're not tuned in, you can be in the middle of it, but if you're not tuned in, you won't get it. You'll just miss the whole thing. So Krishna consciousness is like that. It's to help us tune in to the presence of Krishna. He's there. He's right there. He's actually in every atom even. He's within our hearts, but what to speak of in our hearts? He's in every atom. He is just all-pervasive. But as far as people are concerned, he doesn't exist because they're not tuned in. So through the practice of Krishna consciousness, we can become tuned in. And we will, in due course, Krishna will reveal, first of all, he'll reveal knowledge and give us some detachment from undesirable things and all that. That by his mercy. Then in due course, he will reveal himself to us and we'll become associates, personal associates of God by his grace. Hare Krishna. Is there a party going on? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.